Welcome to Casual Watch Talk, the podcast from the Casual Watch Reviewer YouTube channel. Join us as we talk everything watches, from watch collecting, the latest horology news and interviews. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe on your favourite podcast app. Let's dive into the show. Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 11 of Casual Watch Talk. You're joined by Sam from the Casual Watch Reviewer YouTube channel and Chris from Everyday Mastery on Instagram. Although he's part of the Casual Watch Reviewer family now, I'd say he's now moderating our Facebook group. So come on and have a chat with us. So how have you been? Yeah, how have you been, Chris?
Pretty good.
As always with these shows, we like to start off with what watch are you wearing? So what watch are you wearing, Chris?
So tonight I've got my Casio on. I was out in the garage, and so I have my apparently rare my Casio. It's the what model is it? It's the 850, the DW 850. I'll get back to you on that, but.
Is this the original, not the original Rangeman that's quite sought after?
So it's a G-Shock Tough Solar, and it's I think it's from like 2008, 2007, 2008.
Oh, is it the rally timer?
Yeah. So it's the GWM 850, and it has a feature that only the Mudman and this GWM 850 has, which is a rally countdown timer.
Oh, wow.
So for those of you not familiar, how it works is when you start a rally in a rally car, whether it's a speed distance rally or stage rally, you leave on your minute. So if you have to go at 7:10, you will wait till the clock says 7:09:59, and then when it flips over to 7:10, you go. The rally timer feature allows you to start the countdown but on your minute, and then as it gets to the zero to the next minute, it counts you down. It beeps at 15 and then at 10, and then gives you the beep at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it starts the chronograph on the minute.
We've never talked about this on the channel, but that's one of your other hobbies, is rally racing.
Yep, stage rally racing, absolutely. So yeah, there's you can get some very expensive, Copilot rally navigator watches that will do this. But like I said, the Casio Mudman and this Solar G-Shock GWM 850 will do this. And then what's cool is you can time your stage with it. So if you're driver or co-driver, you can keep track of your stage times with it. It'll hold a whole rally's worth of stages. It's pretty cool.
That's really interesting, because I've never heard of a G-Shock doing that. I know some of the Edifice models, and this is actually going to lead to our main topic of today, which we're going to talk about Casio watches, so maybe we don't want to go too into it now, but I didn't realise the G-Shock had that rally timer, because I had an Edifice that had a lap timer on it for racetracks.
Yeah, I'm not sure if if that works kind of the same, and Casio's marketing actually calls it the rally timer.
So that's interesting. So that's what you're wearing. And then, of course, we like to do have you had a watch obsession this week?
Well, I guess the watch obsession has been G-Shock. Yeah, we'll expand on this in the main part of the show, and we'll talk all about this. But I've got sort of one thing led to another, where I was looking at a watch that you had picked up, your new workout watch.
Yeah.
And I was just you had described it, and I was like, which one is that? And then I was going through the different models, and then just fell into, as you do, a watch obsession. Yep.
Yeah, it's weird, because I've been looking at G-Shocks, and I don't know why this week. I mean, I really like this DW600, but what I've been wearing mostly this week is, I wore the Tudor Black Bay 58. I put it back into rotation. Not that it hasn't been in rotation, but I work a lot from home. I only go into the office like 1 or 2 days. So I've been finding myself wearing like the Ultimate Turtle when I've been at home, or wearing the G-Shock, the DW69 900. So, but I have started wearing the Black Bay 58. It's on a NATO strap from Toxic NATOs. And have you heard of this company?
Yes.
Yeah. This is the first time I've had one of their NATOs. It was kindly sent in by Chris, the channel's resident military expert, aviation expert.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have to get him on this week, or we're going to have to get him on one of the weeks. I think it'll make for a really good episode, so we'll have to sort that out.
And he had a great comment on Facebook, and he had, about the polarized lenses in band in airplanes, because all the screens and all the LCD panels in airplanes. So cool stuff.
That was amazing from last week, wasn't it? This was like a whole new world to me. Polarized sunglasses. So go, if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, go back and listen to last week's episode 10, where we talked about polarized sunglasses, which was a comment from a viewer on the channel. So I've been wearing that, and I guess my watch obsession, I haven't really had one. Now this is weird because I don't want to jinx it, but my Speedmaster might have sold. It's on its way to a new buyer in the UK, and sending it to the UK, for people that don't know, I live in California, even though I'm from like Stockport in Manchester. It was nothing short of just a ginormous pain in the backside. I don't know. I didn't know this, but if you send something that's over the value of $2,500, which Speedmaster clearly was,
right,
UPS just had a complete fit about it. So it got as far as, I did the postage online, it got as far as Texas, and then the Texas, somebody at the Texas facility sent this email, and literally I was blown away by it. It asked for, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it asked for a power of attorney. So me to make UPS a power of attorney, I had to get an EIN number, which is essentially what an employee exactly.
Yeah,
and then they
like as if you were an LLC here. Yep, exactly. As if you were a company selling this.
Exactly. Right. And then also I had to get a license, an export license. And then this other thing, this BCH number or something. So I rung up UPS. They emailed me, let's say, at like 4 a.m. on Saturday morning. And I woke up, wide awake at 4:45. You know when you just feel like a disturbance in the force?
Right.
And you just wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, something's not right here. Something. And what I did is I did the postage online at UPS, but I actually went into a UPS store. And because they're all franchises...
Thinking they would take care of it, right? Thinking that it would be like an easier process.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I did the post. I said, can you just check this over, make sure I got the right forms and everything? Anyway, so I rung UPS then. What's this? I said, I've sold this watch on the internet. It's a pre-owned watch. What is all these documents? Well, and he just was like, I don't know whether I flustered him or he was just explaining it. And as he was explaining it, it got worse and worse and worse. So I just said, look, this is ridiculous. I said, I'm not a company. I said, just please send it back to me.
Just send it back. Yeah. That's crazy. Did you stick with UPS? Did you switch over to postal? What'd you do?
Well, what happened was then he was like, okay, well, I'll just send it back. So then on the update, it just said like return to sender. So then I messaged the buyer, the current buyer. And of course,
we have a problem. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So what does that look like with all the horology house stuff that's gone on? It looked like a classic scam.
Right.
And this guy was like
freaking out.
Yeah, this guy was really, really nice about it. He was like, look, I totally understand. But to me, I was like, oh my God, this is how like Horology House would have started that scam, wouldn't it? Oh, customs or whatever.
Well, UPS, and they're not really sure. And they're like, alarm bell. Same thing with you at 4 o'clock in the morning. Alarm bells are going off. You're like, what is happening?
So then I thought it was coming back to me. So I guess it got to Monday, and a guy like in the evening rings me up from UPS and says, hey, we've got this package for you. And I said, yeah, I know, you kind of return it to me. He says, well, they asked me to give you a call before we returned it. So then he starts talking me through it. And he's like, look, the power of attorney is you only have to fill out one of the documents, because one was if I was like shipping multiple items. He says, just sign it and put it on. It just says that we can pass it through customs. And then he said, just go on this IRS website and register for an EIN number. So I'm now registered under my full name as an employer in California.
Really? Oh, jeez.
But it only took like a few minutes. God knows what
they
come
handle
tax
that.
season, what I'm going to have to do come tax season, but probably, who knows? But
it reminds me of any time if you're a race team and you travel with tires in your race truck. So like you're going to either Canada or Mexico with your race car, and you have like tires and gasoline. They're like, oh, well, you're going to sell these tires. And you're like, no, these tires are for this race car in the trailer, literally. And they're like, oh, right, well, we need receipts for all the tires. And you're like, I don't have receipts for all these tires and all the fuel and everything. And then suddenly you're like, oh no, you're a major importer of like, so Sam, clearly you're running this major importation of, Speedmasters.
Chances would be a fine thing, wouldn't it, if I was like selling Speedmasters like they were going out of fashion? But so then I said, he kind of talked me through it, and he said, look, just fill out this document. He said, don't worry about the other two things, the import license, it's a pre-owned watch, and this other thing where I had to get like a special code. Anyway, so I sent the documents back to him. I just kind of signed it, and then I put this EIN number on. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that it arrives with the new buyer safely. It is currently in the UK at the moment. He's had to pay, I'll update this next week, but he's had to pay a hell of a whack in import duty.
Yeah, I think like anything over like $50, you have to pay something, and then depending on what it is, like you said, $2,500, it like flags, alarm bells, and you're like, guys, this is used. Like, this is why I was looking at watches. I was looking at a watch on eBay from Japan, and I'm glad I took a breath, because apparently it's the same story. So like, Japan will box up the watch and send it to you, but then U.S. Customs is like, this is a $3,000 thing, so you're going to need to go ahead and give us, X amount of percentage of money right now. And so then you look on, so I mean, for those browsing eBay in Japan, I mean, you look and you're like, oh, there's some decent, like Speedmasters and stuff from Japan and etc. There's some good prices, but then in the back of your mind, you have to realize like that's hitting a port, and Uncle Sam wants his cut.
I'm going to go into more of that, and of course I'll make a YouTube video on reasons why I sold my Speedmaster, so look out for that on the channel. So should we dive into a few news stories, Chris?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, sounds good.
First news story, and these are all from Watch Pro. I kind of just scout. Watch Pro has had some really good stories this week. We were a bit light on news stories last week, but this week it's been pretty good. So first one, and this leads into our bigger Casio conversation that we're going to have at the end of this as the main topic. So G-Shock have now released a watch to compete with smartwatches. So it's called the GBD H1000. It's got the usual ABC, barometer, compass, altimeter, but they've added a heart rate sensor, and they've also added an accelerometer, or an acceleration sensor, they're calling it. What's interesting about this is it's not a smartwatch. It's not one of the Samsung Gear watches, because they do have some of those. So I think this is interesting. It's also got GPS in it. So it looks like the last Rangeman that they did with the GPS. So it's got almost like a dot matrix display on it. So I guess it would be similar to maybe like a Pebble watch or something like that. That's showing my age, isn't it? Pebble's long gone, but so I didn't know. What do you think of this? Because and we'll talk about this in the main subject, I suppose. But Casio have been a bit late to the game with the smartwatch, and do you think this is going to get any traction in the face of, because Garmin's doing some great things with smartwatches, Samsung a bit hit or miss, but definitely the Apple Watch is doing really well, and you've got, everybody seems to have a smartwatch at the moment.
I think they're, I from the look of it, I mean, you're definitely right, that sort of Rangeman G-Shock look, I think they're going after their market, which is, their customers that will, get this sort of style of watch, with these sort of additional features. I think you're right. I think they didn't really jump into it, but this definitely looks like sort of a calculated attack on it. It looks like a cool military heavy duty Casio Rangeman style, that sort of big bulky 47 mil G-Shock. And it doesn't look like it's not running like an OS, so it's their own thing. So it's sort of a simple operating system, or simple like computer in it.
Yeah, it's 65 mil. So it's definitely a big one.
Yeah, it's 47.
It's definitely a
big watch at 47.
Yeah, let me just double check that, but I'm sure it's coming in at 65 mil. But I'm just gonna just bear with me a second, caller, while I look at this. But it's 63 by 55.
All right. Oof. But if it's not running, I think maybe that is sort of something. So for the guys, I mean, speaking as a Casio person myself, I would rather have a computer watch that's just running something that's just always going to work, and not have the operating system. The second a smartwatch goes on my wrist and has to boot like a Windows 10 machine, I'm out. I'm like, this is a watch. It has to tell time. It has to do what it says it's going to do on the box. And so like that instant on sort of nature, if they can pull that off, I think they've got some market here,
No, I'm totally with you.
Versus your typical, your Apple Watch. It's like, it's a phone, it's a camera, you can talk into it, it makes pizza, you can order Uber, whatever. And that's great, but like at the same time, like, and it freezes, and it's weird when you have too many icons on the screen, and it's impossible to see in certain settings, stuff like that. So heartbeat sensor cool, and then it's got the other sensors in it. Yeah, I think it's a pretty cool watch.
I'm sure it will have that proprietary charger as well, don't they? They have like a little clip thing that goes on the back of the Rangeman, so I'm sure that's got something similar.
Yeah.
Next story, we've talked about this, I think 3 or 4 times now, and it's amazing that it's still really dominating the news. And this is the coronavirus. I'm sure you have some stock portfolio, either whether it's a retirement or whatever. My savings, I have like an actively managed.
No, I'm an index fund guy. I'm just let it do its thing.
Thing was, it's not been doing its thing this week. I mean, the stock market has just slid this week big time because of the coronavirus. And what was one of the interesting things, well, 2 interesting things from a Watch Pro article, were that also the watch companies have been taking a big slide as well, based on the coronavirus, because of course there's a lot of business in the Asian markets.
The update here, as we record, there was someone in Northern California that picked it up, that they don't know how they got it, but for the most part it's been pretty contained here in the United States. Although if you watch the nightly news, they've been losing their mind about it, which it's like they will show 6 minutes of just absolute like coronavirus crazy, and then be like, the CDC says be prepared, and then they're like, well, what should we do? And they're like, well, don't run out and get groceries or anything. And so there's very uncertainty in the market, and like uncertainty equals uncertainty in the market. And I looked at the Dow today, and we're like 400 points away from 2018. So just kind of going back to 2018 then, I guess, with the stock market.
It's awful, isn't it? So this has been affecting the watch companies. So far, the watch companies aren't actually doing that well. Their stocks in general, but Swatch took a hit of 13% off their stock price. Yeah. Richemont was down 9.1%. LVMH, which of course they've got their other lines. They've got Hennessy, which people might be hitting the bottle if they're fear of them. If they're fear of there's a pandemic.
We actually talked about all these last week, which was good.
Yeah, we did. We went through all the brands. So they're only down 7.9%. But it really goes to show you that the luxury manufacturers that really are kind of suffering because of this coronavirus. But anyway, I wonder if Rolex, whether this will be a wake-up call for Rolex. Probably not. But anyway.
And I think twofold, not only do you have a huge Asian market for luxury watches, but on the supply end, you've got manufacturing there. You know, you've got manufacturing, production. I mean, Seiko and Movements and micro brands, and I would not be surprised if we see this sort of trickle into micro brands that can't get stuff. Or
this will be a real wake-up call for the world that if the supply chain in China stops, just how dependent we are on Chinese parts for, you know, Chinese plastic parts for absolutely everything in our daily life. But anyway, let's try and finish on the last news story on a bit of a lighter note. Ball watches are re-releasing their hydrocarbon watch, I think it's called. This is after 15 years since it was first released. Now, a very important question for you, Chris, is have you ever handled another man's ball?
You couldn't resist. You couldn't resist. Yes, I have. I've held another man's ball. Yes.
And were you impressed?
Just slides right to zero. Yeah, I mean they're cool watches. I like some of their stuff.
Yeah, they have quite a dedicated fan base, don't they? And they have like a pre-order system, don't they, where a lot of the watches you pre-order before, and they're not a micro brand, I don't think by any stretch, but they sort of pre-order it, don't they, to have to kind of build up. They use those tritium tubes, don't they? And sometimes it looks a bit weird on the dial where they made the numbers out of them. But this hydrocarbon one is it's actually incorporated in the bezel, which apparently is like 100 times better than Superluminova. Have you ever seen this in person?
Yeah, I've seen it in person and in person lume. It's pretty cool. But I have I did hear a story that I'd like to share about sort of one of the reasons why they do it. So those tritium tubes, they're regulated by like the Atomic Energy Commission here in the United States. So have fun shipping one of these. By the way, have fun shipping one of these used to the UK. Sorry, but yeah, so they regulate the tritium and the tubes, but it's interesting. They regulate the sale of them. So I heard that one of the reasons why. And let me just check. I'm pretty sure they're not on Amazon. Like you can't buy them.
It's sort of like a hazardous material,
like they have to come from the manufacturer. Is what I'm saying. You can buy them on Amazon, but they have to. You can't, like, they're not third party seller. Like I don't think they have
resold.
Any. They don't have dealerships. Like if you buy it, it's from them.
So I wonder if you did have a reseller in between, whether they'd have some kind of like hazmat license, maybe.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like to report it or whatever. So it's an interesting way that, I mean, I don't know if I think I would if I had some way to control the market and sell of the aftermarket and distribution of my product. I might take that to my advantage. So maybe it's hogwash. I don't know. I heard this. That's my conjecture on Ball, but with the tritium, the control of the sale of the tritium tubes from the manufacturer.
Yeah, and the only other watch I think that I know that uses these are some marathon watches, don't they? You can have a choice. Yeah, so that was interesting. Before we jump into our main topic, just stop for a little quick ad break. Okay, guys, welcome back. Now, on our main topic is going to be a general discussion about Casio, because Casio was certainly the reason as a kid that I got into watch collecting.
Yeah, sort of same story. We were talking about this just a little bit before the show when we go over stuff. Sam and I had sort of a similar experience, and I'm assuming that a lot of our listeners have had this as well. As a kid, getting that cool watch, that has sort of special functions. And Casio definitely nailed that when I was an 11-year-old. And so we were talking about some of the ones that we had. Now, I had one of the original calculators, not the ones with the push button, but the actual, like the flat vinyl buttons. Impossible to press, like even as a little kid. And I remember having that watch for not a long time. And one day I stuck my hand in a fish tank. I was just going around the fish tank, and then I looked and I saw my watch through the glass in the fish tank, and I was like, oh no. And so those early calculator watches were not waterproof. They were not at all splash or anything. So, yeah. So needed a new one.
Definitely as a kid, I was all about Casio watches. In fact, I've got a little history trail here of the Casio watches that I've gone through. So I also had that,
Nice.
the first ever calculator watch that had the rubber buttons that protruded beyond the case, made very famous by Back to the Future. That was the CA53W-1, and I loved that watch. I remember having it as a kid and being in shops and stuff, hoping that somebody might ask me to calculate something. Do you know what I mean?
Could you get the tip? Yeah, exactly.
Well, we did tip in the UK, but
right.
but it was definitely like, I have got a calculator, trying to be like a friendly sort of 6-year-old.
Yeah.
It was I just loved that watch, loved it. Of course, I had, and my dad had one of these as well, the ubiquitous Casio that we joked about, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, that it seems to get a free pass with watch collectors, the F9 1W-1, which is that, the very classic $15 one. Now, I don't know if you ever heard this about the rumours that it was nicknamed by, I think, the US Armed Forces in Afghanistan and Iraq as the terrorist's watch. Have you heard this before?
Yeah, I have heard that. I've heard that.
Yeah, the BBC did a great article on it because it just became ubiquitous as the terrorist watch. Not only did they wear it, but they also would use these unfortunately, for the IEDs and things like that.
Oh, interesting.
It's amazing, like Casio and pop culture.
It's like the Toyota 4Runner with the 50 cal mounted in the bed of it. It's like, well, it's a nice 4Runner, but at the same, or the Tacoma or whatever. It's like, well, it's a nice Tacoma, but.
Yeah, I remember in the 80s. Remember when it was that Mercedes, the one Mercedes that had like the huge front windscreen.
All the dictators had, yeah.
And then, of course, I had, which I loved. There was the two next watches. I loved these ones, and I wish I could buy them again. One of them I could buy again, but the other one, the prices are ridiculous on eBay. So the first one was that data bank. The DBC-32-1A. This was like the ultimate calculator watch, wasn't it? It was sleek. It was promoted as like a business watch. You could store phone numbers on it. It had partly a dot matrix display. It had a memory.
You were a professional 9-year-old. That's great.
And Casio were like pioneers of that
at
the time.
Yeah.
I mean, their watch technology was way ahead of everybody else, I think, at one time.
I can definitely remember spending a good half hour like with the buttons on the watch, like before you could interface it with a computer, typing in people's phone numbers into my watch. I definitely remember doing that.
Oh yeah, and this was Casio even made little pocket organizers, were they called, as well, that you could put this in, but this was before pre-Palm Pilot and all of that stuff, so those were really cool. And then the pinnacle for me, the one that I owned, and then I'm going to talk about one that I didn't own, was the TV remote control watch. This was a revolution, this thing, when it came out. I remember being at school and having one, and not only could you control your television with it, so if anybody's not familiar, it looked like a calculator watch. It would. Do you know the one I'm talking about, Chris?
Yeah, I just pulled it up.
So it looked like a calculator watch. And what you could do is it had pre-programmed TV manufacturers in there. Or what was so cool is you could hold your TV remote control up to it.
It was actually programmable?
Programmable.
Wow.
It was incredible. And I would love to own one again, but they are, to get a decent one now, $200 maybe. You can get a really beaten up one for like $100.
Yeah, so my ultimate was the thermometer, the TS100, and it was a world time, and it had a thermometer in it, and it's like, it has a like metal circle in the center of it with like where the 1980s transistor goes, or 1990s. But what was cool about it is it was designed in a way that it would pick up the air temperature, and it would, I mean, again, Casio being ahead, they had the technology to know that, okay, well, if you put a watch on a 98-degree, wrist, that the heat's going to soak through the watch, and so that you're going to get a weird reading. Well, they had the wherewithal to know that, and they had a correction factor built in, so that you could reliably like look at your watch and be like, oh, okay, it's 50 degrees out, and just know. And kind of the way they designed it was very cool. And same story. Yeah, and same story with the I just looked on eBay for them. There was one that is the cheapest one, $100, and it looks like the dog got it. It's just like it's sanded off, it's rough, it's got chunks taken out of it, and you're just like, oh god. I want the reissue.
That's the unfortunate thing, isn't it, with these plastic watches? And then, of course, for me, the one that I didn't own, but I was obsessed with as a kid, but it was very expensive. In fact, I think it's even expensive now to get a decent pre-owned one, probably about $100, $150, was the PRT-40, which I think might have been the first altimeter barometer compass watch that they did, and it had compass bezel on it. I mean, this thing, you could actually... The sensors protruded out of the case.
This is 67 millimeters.
And the altimeter and I think the barometer sensor, it had a metal covering over it, which looked like a car grille.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing was no doubt about what it was. It wasn't shy about what it was. Those sensors were loud and proud on the side. I fantasize again about buying this watch. I fantasize again about buying the remote control watch, but I don't know whether the memory is better than actually physically owning it, because I did rebuy a Swatch watch a couple of years ago thinking that, I really love that watch, why did I sell it? And then it didn't live up to it. So these things I might kind of consign to
your kid hero watch, basically. And so nowadays you're like, oh god, this is hideous and it's huge, and you're like, I mean, it's nostalgia, definitely, but and this was just the beginning of, I mean, like, speaking of the sensors, like the thermometer, barometer, I mean, like, we were just into the era where they started to make these sensors actually compact. So again, Casio taking advantage of that technology, that like MEMS technology that just came out to allow them to have these sensors. I mean, before this, today we talk about accelerometers and like every one of our phones, whatever. In 1975, if you had an accelerometer, it was 3 gyroscopes in a package, the size of, like a 4-foot cube. So again, the thermometer, the barometer setting, sensors, these sensors, really taking advantage of it. So go Casio.
I guess an interesting question is, considering they were so far ahead of their time in 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe early 2000s, and then they brought out the stroke of genius of creating the G-Shock in 1983. It was incredible, but I wonder why they have not, and this is speculation, and I'll tell you why I'm speculating, but I think that their smartwatches, that run on the Samsung Gear aren't doing as well as they think they are. A, because I've never seen anybody wear one. I've never seen a single one on a watch forum. And also, I don't know if you know this, but there is a Casio overstocked type site. It's run by Casio. You can go on there and they're selling stuff off cheap. And this thing, there's like a few odd coloured G-Shocks on there, but there is a lot of these Samsung Gear watches on there that they've made. So I wonder why they're struggling with it. Maybe because they've gone the opposite way and made them look more rugged, whereas the Samsung and the Galaxy watches and a few of the others have gone to more of like a casual type of watch, where Casio kind of went all in with this Pro Trek, they branded it as, and it's an outdoors watch. What do you think? What do you think on that?
Yeah, with the smartwatch stuff, I'm not entirely sure why Casio didn't, because they definitely waited on it. Like, I felt like at one point in maybe like 2007, 8, maybe 2000, it was kind of like, why isn't Casio in this like space? Like, they were the watchmaker, of my childhood. Like, and innovative watchmaker. So, but I also see that the electronics required to get in and the technology and the R&D to get into that market was changing so fast. I mean, like, same thing with, cell phones. I think do you remember like the early Microsoft watch?
No.
So they had Microsoft came, God, when was that? Like 2000, I'll have to look. I want to say like 2004 or something like that, where there were billboards downtown, and they wanted everybody to have a Microsoft. And like, you can put your office calendar on it, and amazing.
Well, I had the Microsoft Watch that was a collaboration with Timex, the one that actually went to the International Space Station. That was an incredible watch. The Data Link.
Data Link. I think it was after that. I think it was.
It's like a smartwatch instead of a digital.
Yeah, smartwatch, early smartwatch. Like we were walking around with Palm Pilots and stuff, and I think the R&D required. Like, I think Casio had sort of like at that point, like they get what they're doing, and they have the they have the understanding of what they're doing in their market, and for them to put an operating system and a watch with a serious computer in their watch. I mean, I think it was maybe too much of a reach at the time, and in some cases, I agree with you. Like I don't see them everywhere. I do see the Gear, the Samsung. I see a bunch of them occasionally. But it's, and everyone, now everyone Apple Watch, whatever. But I think that the market with buying, I think Casio's got the, like, you buy this and this is your watch now. Whereas like a Samsung like smartwatch is like, oh, well, this is the new smartwatch, and in 6 months it's going to be obsolete, and in a year we'll buy another one. And the battery life, that's certain curiousness of why Casio didn't get into it, but I think there's a lot of pitfalls to the smartwatch industry. I mean, battery life just being one of them. It's now watches will last a couple of days on your wrist, but like the early ones were like 12 hours. Like I'm not charging this thing.
Yeah, it's incredible, that, isn't it? I mean, I suppose we can't finish a conversation about Casio without talking about the G-Shocks. I mean, I've obviously been obsessed with this G-Shock. We've been talking about this Kith one the last couple of weeks, but you found an interesting one for your wife, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, I was looking through, and I was looking at the original, the 5600, and just sort of trying to remember. I definitely had one when I was a kid, the DW 5600. I think I had one, and I specifically remember getting another G-Shock, and giving my old one to a friend who then wore it. So, I mean, it was like, definitely a big part of my childhood. And I was searching around, and apparently they made a Pokemon Pikachu limited edition that comes in the cool Pokeball for those people, those folks. And my wife is obsessed with Pokemon, so enjoys the games, Pokemon Go, etc., hangs out with friends, etc. So her birthday's coming up, so I said I'll just pick this up for her, because I think it's got the cool like strap, and it's this sort of vintage G-Shock. And my wife's, I'd say as much of a nerd, maybe a little bit more than I am. So hopefully she'll appreciate it. And she's very much, she'll wear a nice dress watch when she goes out. She got a Frederic Constant dress watch, and she has a couple other older dress watches that she enjoys. And I try not to push my watch obsessions onto her day to day. Like she wants a digital watch on her wrist. She's a scientist. She needs to look down at her wrist and time stuff and see what time it is. And like, she's no nonsense. She's like, I can barely read an analog watch. It's hilarious.
My favorite graffiti artist, or one of my favorite graffiti artists of all time, was Keith Haring, who unfortunately passed away in the 90s. But his art, very famous, mainly in New York, but his art, they've made 2 limited edition G-Shock watches with very famous, if you've seen Keith Haring's work, it's sort of like outlines, not exactly stick men, but outlines of men, and there's a dog, and really famous.
Yeah, familiar with it.
Before trolls were famous, I suppose he did a very famous troll. He trolled Andy Warhol by making him into Mickey Mouse. So there's a very famous Andy Mouse painting that he did. And G-Shock have made 2 limited edition watches of it that using his artwork. Now, this is what I'm torn by, is they would just be in the drawer. I wouldn't wear them because I'd be afraid of wearing them. So I don't want to buy. I don't want to start collecting G-Shocks.
You own them, yeah.
So that was interesting. So guys, we'd be really interested to know what are your favorite G-Shocks. Let us know, or favorite Casio watches, or if you've got some great Casio stories, let us know. You can leave us a message. We'll leave the link in the show notes. You can actually leave a voice message for us, and we can play it on the podcast, or you can ask us a question we can answer. Or definitely join the Facebook group. We've got some lively conversation on there at the moment. You can ask us questions on there. You can interact with Chris and I. Or you can contact us on our Instagram. Mine is the Casual Watch Reviewer on Instagram. And Chris is Chris at Everyday Mastery. Before we finish up, Chris, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I've got one more Casio story for us.
Oh, yeah.
And this is when I got into watches years ago, one of the things that I sort of do with cars, and I sort of now start to do with watches, is just general watch spotting. And so I'm sort of fascinated by the watches that people wear and people of influence, so to speak, and what they're wearing and why they're wearing it, and this sort of thought experiment that goes behind it. But a couple of years ago, the former chief of staff, John Kelly, was seen wearing a watch as he did his classic facepalm shot at one of the, I think it was at the UN, I believe. And we're not going to get into politics, but it was the most perfect watch shot, because he was like head down, facepalm, it was just his watch. And it, is this black sports watch with Arabic numerals, and everybody was like, "Oh, we think it's like is it a tag? Is it like one of these sort of special military watches? Or, is it a like you mentioned, marathon is, and so the internet kind of blew up a little bit, and over on Reddit there was some conjecture. Well, it turns out, after gathering a couple more photos, John Kelly wore, and still wears, apparently, I've seen him in sort of more recent interviews, the MRW 200, that $12 analog Casio that you can just pick up anywhere, any Target, Walmart. He wears it with a suit in the White House, which is just, it's just like and again, not getting political, but it's just like Clinton with his Timex. I mean, you're just like, oh God, what are you with the suit? You're like, oh, stop.
Yeah, Steve Jobs with his Seiko.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a good point on G-Shock, isn't it? I mean, G-Shock has gone from maybe digital watches, you could argue at one point had maybe a little bit of a geeky kind of image to them. But G-Shock transcended that. I mean, every rapper would be proud to have a G-Shock. Floyd Mayweather's collection of those diamond-encrusted G-Shocks is incredible.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And just sort of like, just thinking about like how, I would love to ask him how he ended up with it. Because my take is he had some beat-up Seiko on a, Spidaflex, gold bracelet that just broke, and he was on his way somewhere in a, C-130 and just stopped off wherever, walked into a Target, walked into a Walmart, picked this off the shelf, and that's his watch. I mean, just...
Oh, John Kelly,
Yeah, John Kelly, yeah. Amazing just to think like how he ended up with it, so... So I've nicknamed it you'll see it in my feed occasionally, it's my sort of my beater watch. I picked one up, and I have nicknamed it the Chief of Staff. So I will be seen mowing the lawn with the Chief of Staff. So.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, it's been a really very nostalgic researching all these watches and getting the correct part numbers was very nostalgic of my youth. I have owned a Casio. I had the Edifice one, the Bluetooth one that had the lap timers in it, but at that time I'd sort of properly got into, I think, mechanical watches, and those kind of hybrid watches I just wasn't really feeling at the time. But been a really interesting discussion. Of course, we really appreciate you listening. If you let us know on Facebook what you think, if you've got any suggestions for a show, that would be awesome. Thanks, Chris, again for joining me this week.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Okay, guys, thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.